at some point, should I read the thing?
Yes.
I guess I could edit this out.
Okay, wouldn't it? Hey there, it's Penny with Brave and Unbroken, and Margaret's with us tonight, and I'll let her intro, and we'll jump right in.
Hi, Margaret Hoelzer, two-time Olympian and National Spokesperson for the National Children's Advocacy Center and all-around advocate.
Thanks. We've been having a lot of fun with these little videos. Not always the highest, best topics, but good topics trying to educate people. Sexual abuse isn't exactly something to laugh about, but we've had a good time diving into some of the deep, dark secrets of some of this stuff. So, Margaret, you got a comment on one of was it on our forgiveness one?
Yes.
Our Easter Sunday service?
Yes.
Like
Let me pull it.
That you received?
I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to read it. We have a comment from Diane, and it says, I don't see how one can forgive their abuser until there's acknowledgement, accountability, and an apology from the abuser. That being said, it is up to the victim survivor to decide whether forgiving is a healthy and beneficial thing for them to do. And then it goes on just to talk a little bit more about essentially getting an apology from their abuser. So, yes, so if you didn't tune in, you should go back and look at our forgiveness clip. But yeah, we talked a lot about basically whether or not forgiveness was something that, you know, you should do, shouldn't do, and ultimately that's up to the individual. But I thought the comment was really interesting because it involves whether or not an apology is merited from your abuser, which was not really something that we had talked about. And so, yeah, I thought we should talk about that today.
Yeah, that's a great topic. Let's talk about that. So you want to jump in first?
Sure. I think it was interesting. For me, it honestly never occurred to me that an apology from my abuser would hold any merit. I haven't seen my abuser since I was 11, for one, and I have zero desire whatsoever to see my abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that actually would be more stressful to me than anything else would be if I actually saw them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought this was fascinating because it honestly never occurred to me to have an apology from them, or that would matter in any way, shape, or form. I certainly could see where that would matter to some people, but it just never occurred to me that it would matter. I think also within that, even if this person did apologize to me, I wouldn't believe it. Like, I don't know that I wouldn't trust that it was sincere or that it was real. And then I would be sitting there going, you know, oh, like, did they mean it? Or, you know, how do I know? So I don't know. So that was kind of my first reaction to it. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. It's interesting. I've talked to several survivors who have said that's something that they know deep down they longed for.
Mm-hmm.
Was an apology or a recognition that what was done was wrong. But rarely does anybody receive that, number one. And number two, the couple that I know of has heard those words are just like you and I, where those words would hold no merit. There'd be no meaningful anything behind them. I do have a couple survivors who have kind of reconciled, received been abused, but then received apologies, and the hard work behind those apologies, and no other victims, and they've moved forward in some fashion of a relationship, and that's been successful for them. But I think overall, to receive, like in my case, my abuser, there was 2 of us that he was prosecuted for, but there was at least 5 of us total, including my mom. I can't even imagine him feeling any remorse whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I would think, okay, he's apologizing. What does he want? Like, there's got to be something that they're trying to get, like if it's in court or, what are the ulterior motives? I think, and that would just be kind of the whole, I'd be looking for, like, what's the end game? What are they getting out of this? Because they wouldn't have done it if they were really that sorry about it. They wouldn't have done it in the first place. So I think that's just kind of my take on it. I do think it's different. I think when it's within the family, potentially, that's a different dynamic that I didn't experience, obviously, with my abuse being outside of the family. So I think that's something that you can speak to a little bit differently than I can. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how I would be like you, I think, if he actually apologized. My biological father apologized. I don't know what I would have done. I'd have been like probably laughed because it would have been too funny. But I did have the opportunity to face mine a couple of years ago. I guess it's been a year ago, this last December. And yeah, there was no even acknowledgement that what happened was wrong, just
Mm-hmm.
that he accepted God or Jesus, Lord Savior, is in his heart, and he'd been able to move forward and like release whatever for almost an hour of me berating him kind of for what he'd done. And that was his response, is like, you need to let go of the hatred in your heart. And so then it was back on me again, right?
Yeah.
Like the narcissistic kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't want your books, I don't want your preaching, and I don't want no part of somebody who forgives that behavior, honestly. And that's
Well,
a whole nother topic, I know, but go ahead.
no, but I think that brings up an interesting point about the whole words "I'm sorry." And I have been told before, for other things, not even sexual abuse, but I've been told before that I am unforgiving, and that sometimes I'm a little bit petty, or I hold on to things, or whatever. And I'll give a silly example, but everybody has somebody in high school that they didn't get along with, or middle school, or whatever the case. And you go to your 10-year, 20-year reunion,
Oh, yeah.
and then all of a sudden you see this person, and for me, I look at that person, I'm like, this person was mean to me when I was in middle school, right?
Right.
I've had friends that are like, Margaret, like, why aren't you over it? Like, that was 15, 20 years ago. Like, you need to not hold on to this, whatever. You know what I mean? And like, you need to grow up. And it's not that I'm holding on to it. Like, it's not like I sit there and again, like, throw darts at this person's head. I don't have like a doll or something. But it's mostly, the way I look at it is this is not a person I need in my life.
Right.
Like, I'm very happy. I have people that I love and I care about. And this is not a person. This was a person that was mean to me at X point in my life. I don't have a need to fulfill to have them now in my life. I'm not going to go out of my way and like punch them in the face. I'm not going to be mean to them. I'm just happy to acknowledge that they're not important to me. And so why do we always have to have this, like, everyone loves each other atmosphere? Like, I do believe it's very important to be civil and polite. And I think that's what being an adult is knowing how to have an adult conversation and be polite.
Right. Yeah, 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 of course.
And of course I'm going to do that. I'm Southern. I have good manners. But I don't think it's childish to just acknowledge and say, no, I don't care for that person, and I don't really particularly want to be around them. And I don't think that makes me childish or less mature or less adult. And going back to bringing that back into sexual abuse or something more important, if let's say that this person does come up to me and say, I'm sorry for having stolen your, I don't know, tricycle on the playground, whatever. Okay, well, what if that was really traumatic to me? What if that caused me lots of trauma? I don't know.
Right.
Does this person just magically get to be absolved because they said I'm sorry? Like, why is that okay? Like, why am I, because I mean, I did have things. Like, I had relationships with coaches that were not the best and that were fair. And all of a sudden, this person just gets to say, I'm sorry, and they feel better.
Right.
But then I'm sitting here left going, wait a minute, I had several years of anger and trauma and an experience. Right. And in the case of abuse, potential years, or even, let's say it was a one-time offense, right? A one-time offense is never one time. You have the moment, and then you have the years of reliving the moment and the emotional scars and the damage done.
Yep.
So why does it make it okay that this person all of a sudden says, I'm sorry? And that just makes it okay? That just makes it what they did right? I don't, that to me, I just think is fascinating that I'm just supposed to acknowledge this, I'm sorry, and go, yeah, the last 7 years of my life didn't matter. You're right. All those months of crying, all the whatever, none of the emotional turmoil that I went through, none of the hard work, healing, none of that matters. It only matters that you have given me these 2 words.
Right.
And so I'm just going to make you feel better. And interestingly enough, I've had conversations like this with someone, and then you say, no, I don't accept your apology. And usually the other person gets mad. And they get mad at you, and then they call you petty, and they tell you how childish you are.
Right.
And again, to me, I'm like, if you've really hurt me, your reaction shouldn't be anger that I'm not accepting your apology. Your reaction should be, okay, you have a right to be angry because I, in fact, did hurt you. So I am now going to continue to show you how sorry I am. And I'm going to continue to beg for your forgiveness.
Right.
And the reality is I actually do, ironically, believe in forgiveness. And if somebody proved to me how sorry they were, I might consider forgiving them. I really might. But you don't just get to say I'm sorry one time.
Right.
And expect me to believe that. So I just, like I said, the whole concept I think is kind of fascinating. So it was a great comment, actually, because it brought up several emotions, which for me were not all related to sexual abuse, because I think it brought up the whole bigger picture of what I'm sorry means, and different relationships with different people and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking, I moved here being Washington State, as I started my 9th grade year, and junior high was awesome, related to friends, not what was going on at home. But then moved to a civilian school. It's not military. Everyone's pretty much gone to school together their entire life. And not fitting in was very traumatic on top of what was already going on. And, sitting at the table of the misfit kids, which I made good friends with, but never really fitting into anything else throughout my high school career. And it was hard. I mean, I didn't go to dances. I was also being stalked. So if I went to a football game, my abuser was somewhere watching. So it made things even more complicated. But I was just thinking about just the I'm sorry's and how Facebook and social media makes these people show back up. Right? And like nothing's ever happened. And you are an Olympian. So I can imagine people just show back up all the time.
Oh, and that's actually another fun point. So I've had some really interesting people show up in my life. I had a boy in 5th grade spit a loogie in my hair. And he was very popular. And I'm trying to remember if it was my first Olympics or my second Olympics. One of the Olympics, he wrote me on Facebook and like wanted to be friends with me. And I was like, seriously? Like, do you not remember doing that? Because I remember it really well. It was really gross.
Yeah.
And then I remember, like, I had another girl who was just absolutely horrible to me, when I was 11. And she reached out to me. This was actually somewhat recently. And it wasn't an I'm sorry. The boy actually, instantly enough, I think if I recall correctly, he was, I think, apologizing in some form. The girl who reached out to me was not apologizing. She just was acting like we were best friends, like a long lost best friends, and like talking about all the great times we'd had and this and that. And I was like, we aren't friends. Like, you were horrible to me. And now, because I'm an Olympian, like, you're just gonna like,
right.
This didn't happen, like conveniently didn't happen, and we're gonna all act like we're best friends. So it's kind of interesting how people's perceptions and memories change. But and again, it's not that I don't think that people grow up, and it's not that I don't think that people have the ability to be sorry.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't think that you should believe in someone's sorriness, or I just think it's an interesting topic, and I think each relationship is different, and maybe the boy who spit a loogie in my hair genuinely was sorry, but I just think it's an interesting, like I said, like, all of those relationships are different. And so you have to, I think, treat them differently. I don't think you can just blanket and I'm sorry with all of them. I think you have to individually look at all of them and treat them individually. You know, every individual relationship is different. And so I think sometimes we get this message of you just have to blanketly do this thing. And unfortunately, I don't think anything in life is that easy. I think you have to individually look at things and say, you know.
I agree with you 100%. I do. And I think we also need to just step back and see how often we say, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're constantly, I think human race constantly is apologizing. And I had a good friend several years ago who kind of called me out. Why are you, almost self-deprecating in a way, right? You're depreciating yourself in that you're like doing a commentary in advance, or you're like disclaiming, I'm sorry, I'm bothering you. I'm sorry. Like, it's also kind of almost a rude assumption too, that, how about let that person make the call on if, you have a reason to be sorry, or whatever. And I think it kind of goes back to that same situation where, in abuse and abusers and victims, like the emptiness, the lack of meaning.
No, I agree. I agree completely. And I think that goes to trusting yourself, having strength in yourself, and not even just that, goes actually to a bigger topic, but allowing yourself, I'm trying to think of the words I even want to say here, and I can't even think of what I'm trying to say. I think that just allows yourself to be uncomfortable. People often, I think, don't want to do something regardless of what the thing is. And they're either afraid to say, I'm sorry. They're afraid to say, I don't want to do that. They're afraid to tell their boss, hey, I'm not comfortable with this.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever the thing may be, and just, you have to stand up for yourself. And we also have to be supportive of those around us, our friends, our coworkers, and when someone makes a decision, and even if we don't agree with it, we need to be supportive of what that person's boundaries are.
Absolutely.
To
the simple things of, what do you want for dinner?
Yeah.
I don't know what I want. What do you want? What do you want? People know what they want. Like, just speak up and say what you want. I mean, it's just the courageous, definitive conversations. I think that I know for myself as a survivor, it's not always easy to do, right? You're always, putting everyone else in front of yourselves or yourself, and that can be a challenge. And that's kind of, I think, goes back to the same topic that we're talking about.
Well, and I guess where I'm even thinking of it is this, I think, goes back to, I forget which of our podcasts where we talk about this, but I don't have a problem saying no. I don't have a problem saying these are my boundaries. I've always been very clear with like my boundaries. This is what I'm doing. Yeah. And I've gotten so much flack for that. I've gotten so much flack for saying, I'm not comfortable doing this, or I'm not going to forgive that person. And I think it makes other people uncomfortable how comfortable I am with what my boundaries are, because my boundaries might not be what the other person's boundaries are.
Right.
The other person wants me to be more forgiving. Maybe the other person wants me to, do whatever. You and I were talking about this a little while earlier, but I had somebody ask me to write a recommendation for them one time. And this was somebody that I was not comfortable writing a recommendation for. And so, I wrote them a very polite, email and said, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable doing this. And they were upset about it. I mean, the person was offended and they were very upset. And, we went back and forth a couple of times, and I genuinely tried to be as professional as I could, because that was a hard email to write. It was really hard for me to write back and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this. And no, I'm not going to do this. I mean, the reality is it would have been a lot easier for me just to not respond at all. But that's very against my personality type. I've never been the person who's like, give someone your number and just ignore them. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. My personality is that I would much rather call the person and say, I'm not interested, versus just ghost them and not respond.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times when you call and tell the person you're not interested, then they get mad. and then they're upset with you. And I'm like, why are you mad at me? Would you have rather me ignore you and
Right.
like ghost you, so this person was upset that I refused to write them a recommendation. And, I mean, but it wasn't, the interesting part wasn't that it was the person that was upset. My friends were upset about it as well, because this was someone that, several people that I knew also knew. So, people ended up finding out. So I ended up getting a lot of feedback from people that I knew, going, I cannot believe you wouldn't write this person a recommendation. And I even had people say, well, it doesn't matter that you don't have to like the person. You don't have to think they're good at something. You don't have to. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're telling me to lie? You're telling me to write a false recommendation? And I had people going like, well, yeah, it's just easier. And I was like, I'm not asking to do the easier thing, right? Like, you're right, it is easier. It would be easier for me to make something up, but that's not the right thing to do.
Right. Yep.
And so I thought it was fascinating that like I said, it actually bothered me more that I got feedback from my friends, like telling me that this was not an acceptable behavior, than it did from the person, because I understood that the person who had asked me was going to be offended.
Yeah, sure.
So, like I said, I think sometimes people, when you do know what, the flip side is people don't have strong boundaries and don't know their boundaries, but then people are uncomfortable when you actually do have very strong boundaries. And that's been my experience, is that I tend to know what my boundaries are, and I tend to have strong opinions, and I tend to have, like I said, if I don't forgive someone, or I don't want to, it's because I don't need that person in my life. People are constantly telling me like, oh, so it's, I think, like I said, it's interesting that seems to make people uncomfortable.
I agree. And it kind of goes back to that bossy versus leader kind of scenario, right? If in some situations, if you were male and putting your foot down and saying, this is my boundary, I'm not writing this recommendation, I guarantee guy friends aren't going to harass that person about it.
Oh gosh, no.
But I think there is something around a strong woman who has courageous conversations and who stands up for what they believe in and has, the boundaries that they have and maintains those. And then that's just one of those things that isn't totally accepted even as of now.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're right. That's a valid point.
Yeah. So, and we're, as usual, talking about hard stuff anyway. And we're not here to make people comfortable. We're kind of here to make everyone uncomfortable, including ourselves at times. So yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. Thanks for being here.
Much. But yeah, please keep giving us comments, because obviously that, like I said, that one made me think. It made Penny think. So like I said, please keep writing in, because we'll talk about it.
Absolutely. Next time.
Thank you.